Okay, what if I told you that one of the best things you can do to learn something is to get it completely wrong first? I know, it sounds crazy, but what I'm about to share is one of the most powerful findings in the science of learning, and it's going to flip everything you thought you knew about being a good student on its head.
So get this, researchers in Singapore did something that sounds completely insane. They took two groups of students and found that the group they actually encouraged to fail first scored over 50% higher on conceptual tests. You know, the tests that measure if you really get it. That's not a small difference. That is a massive leap in understanding.
So the first thing you're probably asking is, how is that even possible? How does getting something totally wrong make you learn it better than just being taught the right way from the beginning? Well, the answer reveals something absolutely fundamental about how your brain is actually wired to learn.
Let me paint the picture for you. They gave ninth graders these really complex math problems without any prior instruction. No textbook chapter, no lecture. They just said, here you go, figure it out. And, as you'd expect, most students came up with 0 correct solutions. Total failure. But here's the kicker. A month later, that same group completely crushed the group that was taught the traditional way.
And you might be thinking, okay, that's just one weird study, right? A fluke? Nope. This isn't just a one-off. There's actually a formal name for this phenomenon, and it is backed by decades of research in cognitive science. So let's unpack the real science behind the struggle.
The whole concept is called productive failure. And it's really, really important to get this. It's a learning design. This isn't about just making random mistakes. It's a structured process where you first try to solve a problem you don't actually know how to solve, and only after that struggle do you get the formal instruction.
And the evidence for this is just stunning. For example, one study found a 56% increase in how well students retained information. So how'd they do that?
Well, in that study, students just tried to guess the English translations of Swahili words before they were ever shown the answers. They literally got 0% of their guesses right. But that simple act of trying and failing primed their brains so well that they remembered the correct pairs 56% better later on. Incredible.
And there's more. Another study found a 24% boost in learning, but this one happens specifically when we're not just wrong, but we were really confident that we were right.
Yeah, this is called the hypercorrection effect. You know the feeling, right? When you are so sure you have the right answer, and then you find out you're totally wrong. That feeling of surprise sends this powerful signal to your brain. It's like an alarm bell going off that says, hey, pay attention. Your understanding of the world here needs an update now. That's why we learn the right answers so much more effectively in those moments.
And this all leads to probably the most important insight from all this research. When the scientists analyzed the data from that first math study, they found something truly shocking. The quality of the students' first attempts, it had 0 correlation with how much they learned in the end. It didn't matter if their first answers were a total mess or kinda close. The real takeaway is that the attempt itself, the simple act of struggling with the problem, is what creates the learning benefit. Okay, so we've seen the what. We know that failing first really works. But now let's get into the why. What is actually happening inside our brains that makes this whole struggle thing so productive?
The secret is all about reordering the process. I mean, just look at this comparison. Traditional learning gives you the instruction first, then you practice. Productive failure completely flips that script. You struggle first, which prepares your brain for the instruction that comes later. It's all the same ingredients, just in a way more effective order.
Let me give you a metaphor. Think of traditional learning. Getting a lecture without any prep. It's like trying to grow a garden by just throwing seeds onto concrete. The information, the seeds, they might be perfect, but they've got nowhere to take root. They just sit on the surface and they're easily washed away.
But productive failure, that's different. That's like tilling the soil before you plant the seeds. That initial struggle, that attempt to solve the problem on your own, it prepares the ground of your mind. It makes your brain receptive and ready for that new information to land and actually start to grow.
So how exactly does it till the soil? Well, the struggle does a few amazing things. First, it makes your brain pull up any related knowledge you already have stored away. But second, and this is the real magic, it painfully and clearly exposes your specific knowledge gaps. You figure out exactly what you don't know. This creates these little cognitive hooks, basically questions that your brain is now desperate to answer. So when the real lesson finally comes, you pay up to 35% more attention to the exact information you need. Okay,
So this is all really fascinating science. But the big question is, how can you and I actually use this to learn better, like today? Let's build your very own productive failure toolkit.
This is probably the single most powerful and easiest technique. Before you even read a single word of a textbook chapter, go straight to the questions at the end. Try to answer them. Force yourself to commit to an answer even if it's a total wild guess. Then go and study the chapter, and afterwards, go back and see how you did. That simple act of pre-testing can boost your retention by over 50%. It's that powerful.
And here are 2 more quick ones you can use all the time. First, something I call guess before Google. Before you immediately search for an answer, just spend 5 minutes forming your own hypothesis. For instance, if your code is breaking, try to sketch out why you think it's breaking before you look it up. Second, invention before instruction. If you're learning a new math concept, spend 15 minutes trying to invent your own way to solve a problem before you learn the official method. That struggle will make the real answer stick so much better.
But when it comes right down to it, this research isn't just about a new study hack. It's about a really profound shift in your mindset. It's about giving yourself permission to get it wrong.
For so long, we've been taught that we have to avoid mistakes. We think that getting something wrong is a sign of failure, that it's just a waste of our precious time. But the science is crystal clear on this. That's not true.
Getting it wrong is the work. It is the very process of preparing your brain to learn deeply and effectively. That struggle isn't an obstacle to learning. The struggle is the learning. So, I'll just leave you with one final question to think about. Now that you know this, what's the next thing you're going to learn? And how will you dare to get it wrong first?